Street photography has seen numerous evolutions since its inception, with each generation of photographers contributing something distinct. Among these pioneers of street photography is Saul Leiter, whose groundbreaking work blurred the boundaries between painting and photography. Leiter's use of vibrant colour, reflections and out-of-focus elements created a painterly style, transforming mundane street scenes into evocative, dreamlike compositions. Today, his influence is undeniable as thousands of photographers strive to emulate his aesthetic. Yet in this widespread admiration lies a problem: the overuse of Saul Leiter's style. While there's no denying Leiter's genius, the prevalence of his influence has led to a kind of creative stagnation in my opinion. Social media platforms are flooded with images that are reminiscent of his approach. Reflections in windows, figures obscured by objects, bold patches of colour, and an intentional softness that abstracts the scene. Don't get me wrong, a lot of these Saul Leiter style images are absolutely beautiful, but as more photographers kind of rely on these tricks only and don't seek personal growth and development, over time they lose their originality and depth. What was once innovative and daring has become kind of predictable, a formulaic approach that limits creative exploration rather than encouraging it. I'm very much guilty of this, or when I started out in street photography, I fell in love with Saul Leiter's work and found his influence creeping into my photography in a big way. To be honest, I really enjoy comments like, "Wow, your photography is so much like Saul Leiter," but it makes me feel kind of cringy to think I pursued those kind of comments back then without realising I was being so derivative. So what's the problem with trying to be too much like Saul Leiter? The first issue with this overuse of Saul Leiter's style is the erosion of authenticity. Street photography, in my opinion, at its core is about capturing the spontaneity and essence of life in public spaces. It's meant to be an honest, unfiltered reflection of the world around us. When photographers consciously or unconsciously mimic Saul Leiter's style, they risk imposing an aesthetic framework that might not actually suit the scene or subject matter that they're photographing. Leiter's signature techniques, his abstraction, his use of reflections and his focus on colour were deeply personal. They emerged from his own sensibility and his background as a painter. To simply copy these techniques without really understanding the intention behind them can result in images that feel a bit contrived, as though the photographer is imposing a vision on the world rather than responding to it organically. Leiter's work was not just about creating pretty pictures. His choice of colour and composition was informed by a deep engagement with the world around him. His photographs are introspective, a quiet dialogue between him and his environment. When photographers attempt to replicate this style without the same level of introspection, the results often lack substance. A beautiful reflection or a splash of colour may catch a viewer's eye, but without a deeper emotional or narrative connection, the photograph risks being hollow, more decoration than document. Another challenge with the overuse of Saul Leiter's style is that it can inadvertently narrow the definition of what street photography can actually be. Street photography is a vast and diverse genre that spans many styles, from the raw, high-contrast images of Daido Moriyama to the layered, complex frames of Alex Webb. However, as Leiter's style becomes a bit more prevalent in today's photography scene, especially on visual platforms where aesthetics are often rewarded over substance, it can create the illusion that this is the right way to do street photography. This imitation culture can lead to a dilution of Leiter's legacy as well. When a style becomes too common, it loses its potency. Leiter's work was groundbreaking because it was different. It stood apart from the grainy, hard-edged black and white photography that dominated street photography in his time. If everyone is doing Leiter-like photography today, then the impact of that aesthetic diminishes. What made his images so compelling was not just the technical choices he made, but also the fact that they were a fresh way of seeing the world. There's also the risk of street photography becoming detached from its original social function. In my opinion, historically, street photography has served as a visual record of society, a way of documenting the everyday lives of people in urban spaces. By focusing too much on aesthetic compositions, colourful reflections, abstractive forms, and blurred figures, there's a kind of danger that photographers will lose sight of the human element, which is at the heart of street photography. Leiter's work, though often abstract and painterly, still managed to capture the soul of the streets. He conveyed a sense of place and mood that was unmistakably tied to the lives of the people in his scenes. Photographers who just try and mimic that kind of style without the sensitivity to the human condition that Saul Leiter had risk creating images that are more about surface than they are about substance. So what steps should we take to enjoy Saul Leiter's influence without copying it? Of course, none of this is to say that Saul Leiter's influence is inherently bad, or his work shouldn't be appreciated, studied, and even emulated in certain ways. Like all great artists, his work offers valuable lessons about photography, about colour, composition, and the importance of seeing the world in a way that's personal and unique. So I actually encourage you to go study his work and experiment with his techniques. But the problem comes when his influence becomes overwhelming, when photographers stop really searching for their own voice and instead rely on those kind of stylistic choices of someone else. I think what we should try to do now is return to the principles that made Leiter's work so profound. A commitment to seeing the world with fresh eyes, to finding beauty in the ordinary, and to pushing the boundaries of what street photography can actually be. Photographers should be inspired by Leiter, not by copying his technique, but by embracing his spirit of experimentation and individual vision. Street photography is a dynamic and ever-evolving form of expression, and while it's natural, of course, to be influenced by the greats, it's also essential to try and resist the temptation to follow in their footsteps too closely. Now, I didn't make this video to put you off making photos reminiscent of Saul Leiter. His style is very striking and accessible, especially for beginners. And if you want to go off into the streets and practice that kind of aesthetic style of Saul Leiter and you're happy with the outcome, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you're looking to grow as an artist though, and find yourself following a style of another photographer maybe a little bit too closely, perhaps it's worth really thinking about how you can break away from it and experiment with new ideas. I think we need to be mindful of the difference between inspiration and imitation, seeking our own voice rather than merely replicating the work of others. The legacy of Saul Leiter should be one of creative freedom and exploration, not constraint and repetition. If you want to break away from the usual sort of tips and tricks you hear about street photography, then check out this video next. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.